Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering you owe an extra £43,000 every single year just for living in your own home. Not a mortgage payment, not a one-time fee, an annual tax bill that never stops coming. This isn't some dystopian fantasy. It's a real proposal being seriously considered by the current government, and it could devastate millions of property owners across the UK. We're talking about people who've worked their entire lives, paid off their mortgages, and planned their retirement around staying in the homes they love. All of that could be ripped away because of a tax scheme that's being discussed behind closed doors right now. The Times, The Guardian, and other major outlets have been reporting on this over the past week, and what I've uncovered is genuinely alarming. This isn't just bad news for landlords or property investors. If you own any property in the UK, especially if you're anywhere near London or the South East, you need to hear this. Before we go any further, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Property Reporter for the latest property news, market updates, and government policy changes that could affect your home and your wealth. We're bringing you the information that mainstream media buries in the fine print, and we need your help spreading the word. So what exactly is this new tax, and why should you care? The government is floating the idea of completely scrapping two taxes that everyone is familiar with: stamp duty and council tax. On the surface, that might sound appealing. Who likes paying stamp duty when you buy a property? Who enjoys their council tax bill showing up every year? But here's the catch. They're not getting rid of these taxes out of generosity. They're replacing them with something far more expensive for millions of people. It's called a property value tax, and it works completely differently from what we have now. Under the current system, you pay stamp duty once when you purchase a property, and then you pay council tax annually based on outdated property valuations from 1991. It's not a perfect system, but it's manageable for most people. The new proposal would eliminate both of those and introduce an annual tax based on your property's current market value. And this is where things get really concerning. According to the leaked details, any property worth over £500,000 would be hit with an annual tax of 0.5% of its value. Properties worth over £1 million would face an even higher rate of 0.8% every single year. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't a one-time payment. This is an annual charge that will keep increasing as property values rise. Now, you might be thinking that £500,000 sounds like a lot of money, and surely only wealthy people own properties worth that much. But that's not how the UK property market works anymore. The average house price in London is already over £660,000. That means the vast majority of homeowners in the capital would immediately fall into this tax bracket. We're not talking about mansion owners or property tycoons. We're talking about ordinary families living in modest three-bedroom terraced houses in areas like Croydon, Walthamstow, or Barking. These aren't luxury properties. They're normal family homes that happen to be located in a region where property values have skyrocketed over the past 2 decades. And here's where the real injustice comes in. Many of these homeowners are what financial experts call asset-rich but cash-poor. They might own a property worth £700,000 or even £1 million, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of income. In fact, a huge proportion of these people are retirees living on fixed pensions. They bought their homes decades ago when prices were a fraction of what they are today. They've paid off their mortgages. They've worked hard their entire lives. And now they're living modestly on pension income that might only be £15,000 or £20,000 a year. Their home is their biggest asset, but it doesn't generate income. They can't eat bricks and mortar. They can afford to stay in their homes because their monthly expenses are low. No mortgage, reasonable heating bills, and manageable council tax. But if this new property value tax comes in, everything changes overnight. Let me give you a real example that shows just how devastating this could be. I have a friend who owns a property in the southeast worth around £6 million. Now, before you start thinking this person is some ultra-wealthy elite who can afford anything, Let me explain their situation. They're retired. They worked extremely hard for decades, made smart financial decisions, and invested in property when they had the chance. Their home is beautiful, and they've earned the right to enjoy it in their retirement. But here's the thing. Their annual income from their pension is nowhere near enough to cover a massive new tax bill. I sat down and did the math. If this property value tax goes through at the proposed rate, they would be looking at an annual bill of approximately £43,000 every single year. That's more than double their entire pension income. There's no way they could afford it. They would be forced to sell their home, uproot their entire life, and move to a cheaper area just to survive financially. And it gets worse. The government is also considering introducing a seller's tax on top of everything else. So not only would my friend be forced to sell their home because they can't afford the annual tax, but they'd also get hit with a huge tax bill just for selling it. It's a double penalty that punishes people for circumstances completely beyond their control. They didn't ask for property prices to rise to these levels. They didn't demand that their home's value increase by millions of pounds. But now they're being treated like they've done something wrong simply because they own a valuable asset. But the problems don't stop with individual homeowners. This tax would create massive distortions across the entire UK property market, and the consequences would be felt by everyone, whether you own a property or not. Think about what happens to properties that are currently valued at around £450,000. Right now, these homes are comfortably below the £500,000 threshold where the new tax kicks in. But property values don't stay frozen in time. They increase gradually every year. So what happens when a property that's currently worth £470,000 starts approaching £500,000? Suddenly, sellers have a huge incentive to keep their asking prices just below that threshold. Why would anyone pay £501,000 for a property when it means getting hammered with an annual tax bill? The result is that properties near this threshold will get stuck. Their values will be artificially suppressed because crossing that line becomes financially toxic for buyers. Meanwhile, properties that are already well above the threshold will likely see their prices increase even more. If you're selling a home worth £2 million and you know you're going to face a seller's tax when you offload it, you're going to want to maximise the sale price to cover that tax and still walk away with a decent amount. So prices at the higher end of the market will get pushed up further, making the housing crisis even worse for people trying to get on the ladder. The rich get richer, the middle gets squeezed, and the poor get priced out entirely. It's a recipe for economic disaster. And then there's the regional inequality issue, which is perhaps the most absurd part of this entire proposal. Under the current council tax system, everyone pays something, regardless of where they live or what their property is worth. It's not perfect, and the valuations are wildly outdated, but at least it's somewhat fair in the sense that everyone contributes. But under this new property value tax, the burden would fall almost entirely on homeowners in London and the South East. Up north, where property prices are much lower, hardly anyone would pay a penny. The average house price in somewhere like Doncaster or Hull is well below £500,000. In fact, most properties in these areas are worth less than £200,000. So under the new system, people in these regions would essentially get a free ride. No stamp duty, no council tax, and no property value tax either. But someone has to pay for local services. Someone has to fund the councils, the roads, the schools, and everything else that council tax currently covers. So who picks up the tab? The homeowners in London and the South East, that's who. You'd have a situation where people in expensive areas are subsidising the entire country while people in cheaper regions pay nothing. Now, some redistribution of wealth already happens through the tax system, and that's generally considered fair. But this takes it to an extreme level that's hard to justify. Why should someone living in a modest 3-bedroom house in Croydon be forced to pay thousands of pounds a year to fund services in a completely different part of the country while their neighbours up north pay nothing? It makes no sense, and it's politically toxic. There's also the question of fairness for people who've spent their entire lives planning for retirement. Most people who own valuable properties in London and the South East didn't buy them last year. They bought them 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. Back then, these properties cost a fraction of what they're worth today. People made long-term financial plans based on the tax system that existed at the time. They worked hard, saved money, paid off their mortgages, and set themselves up for a comfortable retirement. They calculated their pension income, factored in their expected expenses, and made sure everything balanced out. And now, decades later, the government wants to change the rules and hit them with a massive new tax bill that they never saw coming and never budgeted for. That's not just unfair. It's a betrayal of the social contract between citizens and the state. When you work hard, play by the rules, and plan your life around the existing system, you shouldn't have the rug pulled out from under you at the last minute. Especially not when you are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s and don't have the ability to go back to work and earn more money to cover these new costs. These are people who've contributed to society their entire lives. They've paid income tax, national insurance, VAT, and every other tax under the sun. And now, in their retirement, they're being told that's not enough. They need to pay even more, or they'll be forced to sell their homes and leave the communities they've lived in for decades. The political implications of this proposal are massive, and I genuinely believe that if Labour pushes this through, it could cost them the next election. Property ownership is deeply personal for people. Your home isn't just an asset on a balance sheet. It's where you raised your kids, where you celebrated birthdays and holidays, where you've built a lifetime of memories. The idea that the government could force you out of your home simply because it's become too valuable is something that will resonate emotionally with millions of voters. And it's not just Conservative voters who will be outraged. Plenty of Labour supporters own property in London and the South East. They're going to be hit by this tax just as hard as anyone else, and they're not going to be happy about it. There are better ways to fix the problems with council tax and stamp duty without resorting to such a blunt and punishing instrument. Council tax valuations could be updated to reflect current property values, but with bands adjusted so that people aren't suddenly facing enormous bills. Stamp duty could be reformed to reduce the burden on first-time buyers, while increasing it slightly on second homes and investment properties. There are smart, targeted solutions that could raise revenue without destroying people's retirement plans or forcing them out of their homes. But instead, the government seems determined to pursue this nuclear option that will cause maximum disruption and maximum pain for ordinary homeowners. The worst part is that this isn't just speculation or rumour. Multiple credible news outlets have reported that this proposal is being seriously discussed within government circles. The Times has covered it extensively. The Guardian has written about it. This isn't some fringe idea being floated by a backbench MP. This is something that senior figures in the government are actively considering, and it could appear in the next budget. That means it could become reality sooner than you think. And once it's in place, it will be almost impossible to reverse. Governments rarely give up a new source of revenue once they've introduced it. So if this tax goes through, you can expect it to stick around for decades, with rates gradually increasing over time as the government looks for more money. So what can you do about it? First, spread the word. Share this video with everyone you know who owns property. The more people who are aware of this proposal, the more pressure the government will face to back down. Public backlash works. We've seen it time and time again with unpopular policies that get quietly shelved after widespread criticism. Hit that share button right now and send this to your family, your friends, your colleagues. Make sure they know what's at stake. Second, make your voice heard. Write to your MP. Tell them exactly how this tax would affect you and your family. Politicians respond to constituent pressure, especially when an election is on the horizon. If enough people make it clear that this policy is unacceptable, they'll think twice before pushing it through. This is one of the most extreme and unfair tax proposals I've come across, and I've covered plenty of controversial policies on this channel. The Renters' Rights Bill had its problems, but at least you could argue there were some genuine intentions to protect tenants mixed in with the bad ideas. But this property value tax, I can't see any upside for ordinary people. It punishes success, destroys retirement plans, creates massive regional inequality, distorts the property market, and forces people out of homes they've lived in for decades. It's bad policy on every single level, and it needs to be stopped before it becomes law. If you found this video helpful, and you want to stay updated on all the latest property news and government policy changes, make sure you're subscribed to Property Reporter and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. We're going to keep digging into this story and bringing you the facts that other channels ignore. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about this tax proposal. Are you worried about how it might affect you? Do you think the government will actually go through with it? I want to hear your thoughts, and if you haven't already, check out our free guide on navigating the property market in uncertain times. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.